Have you ever wondered if the greatest treasure on Earth isn't buried in a bank vault, but hidden beneath a swamp everyone else is afraid to touch? When a 24-year-old man spent his last $15 buying a forgotten swamp everyone believed was worthless, the entire town laughed at him. But beneath the thick mud lay an ancient river, a secret his grandfather had protected for decades, and a discovery that would uncover hidden gold, preserve an irreplaceable ecosystem, and prove that sometimes God saves his greatest blessings for those willing to trust when no one else believes. Spring 2020. Cold rain swept across the countryside outside Paducah, Kentucky, where swollen branches of the Ohio River overflowed their banks beneath heavy gray skies, leaving fields soaked and forgotten. At 24 years old, Noah Walker had already experienced enough loss to make most people twice his age give up. Standing just over 6 feet tall with a lean athletic build shaped by years of farm work, Noah had thick dark brown hair that always seemed slightly unkempt beneath an old canvas cap, weathered hands rough from repairing fences, and thoughtful hazel eyes that rarely revealed what he truly felt. A short, neatly trimmed beard softened the sharp lines of his jaw, while quiet determination defined his character far more than confidence ever had. Since losing both his parents in a highway accident during high school, he had been raised by his grandfather, Samuel Walker, a humble outdoorsman who believed the land always rewarded patience more than greed. When Samuel passed away the previous winter, he left Noah little more than unpaid property taxes, mounting family debt, and a weathered farmhouse that barely kept out the rain. Most people expected Noah to sell everything and leave Kentucky behind. Instead, he surprised the entire county. Using the last $15 he could gather after settling the estate, Noah purchased an abandoned 20-acre swamp that had been seized by the county years earlier when no owner could afford its taxes. The land was little more than mud, stagnant water, fallen cypress trees, and tangled reeds. There was no road leading into it, no electricity, no buildings worth saving, and no practical value according to every appraisal ever written. Local farmers laughed openly whenever they saw the young man studying maps of the swamp. He just bought 20 acres of mosquitoes, one man joked outside the general store. Another shook his head. Grief makes people do foolish things. Noah never argued. Deep inside, he often questioned himself as well. Every dollar he had possessed was gone. If he had made the wrong decision, there would be no second chance. Yet something kept pulling him back to the forgotten land. It was not hope of becoming rich. It was the feeling that his grandfather had wanted him to find something more important than money. Several days later, while cleaning Samuel's old equipment shed behind the farmhouse, Noah discovered a narrow wooden crate hidden beneath rusted fishing nets and broken tools. Inside rested dozens of carefully preserved notebooks filled with geological sketches, river current measurements, hand-drawn maps, and yellowed aerial photographs dating back to the 1960s. Samuel had never been a professional scientist, but he had spent nearly 50 years quietly studying the rivers and wetlands surrounding western Kentucky with extraordinary patience. One notebook immediately captured Noah's attention. Across its faded leather cover, Samuel had written only 3 words: Old River Survey. As Noah slowly turned the fragile pages, he found detailed maps showing an ancient branch of the Ohio River that had disappeared after a catastrophic flood generations earlier. Every few pages, Samuel had circled the same forgotten swamp Noah had just purchased. Beside one carefully drawn sketch appeared a single handwritten sentence: The river's greatest treasure always rests where it was forced to stop. Noah stared at the words for several long moments. Outside, rain continued falling across the silent countryside. Inside the old shed, a forgotten mystery quietly began to awaken. Noah spent the following week studying every page of Samuel Walker's journals until he realized he could not solve the mystery alone. The hand-drawn river channels, elevation notes, and geological sketches referred to scientific principles far beyond his experience. Remembering an article his grandfather had once clipped from a newspaper, Noah drove to the University of Kentucky and requested a meeting with Dr. Amelia Brooks. At 34 years old, Amelia had already earned a reputation as one of the country's most promising geomorphologists. Standing about 5 feet 7 with a slender athletic build, chestnut brown hair tied neatly into a practical ponytail, clear green eyes, and lightly freckled skin, She carried herself with quiet confidence rather than academic pride. Years of studying rivers across Appalachia had taught her that landscapes often preserve stories long after people had forgotten them. Growing up beside the Kentucky River in a family of fishermen had also given her a deep respect for waterways, making her believe that every river deserved to be understood before it was changed. When Noah carefully spread Samuel's journals across her office table, Amelia expected little more than old family notes. Within minutes, however, her expression changed. She unfolded century-old topographic maps from the university archives and overlaid them with Samuel's hand-drawn sketches. Hour after hour, they compared faded contour lines, historic flood records, and aerial photographs dating back to the early 20th century. By evening, an astonishing pattern emerged. Long before modern roads and levees existed, 3 branches of the Ohio River had flowed directly beneath the swamp Noah now owned. Over hundreds of years, those slow-moving channels had repeatedly deposited dense layers of heavy minerals before changing course after catastrophic floods. Samuel had spent decades quietly documenting the forgotten river system without ever publishing his work. "If these maps are accurate," Amelia whispered, tracing one ancient channel with her finger, "your grandfather wasn't chasing a legend. He was following geology." Encouraged but cautious, Noah and Amelia began surveying the swamp every weekend. They collected sediment samples, measured elevations, and carefully washed muddy gravel through simple gold pans. For weeks they found nothing except clay, black sand, and ordinary river stones. Yet Noah never complained. Each unsuccessful day only strengthened his respect for the patience Samuel must have possessed. Then, one cool morning after heavy rain exposed fresh sediment near a fallen cypress tree, something flashed beneath the water. Noah scooped a pan of gravel and slowly washed away the lighter material. Tiny golden specks remained at the bottom, shimmering beneath the sunlight. His heartbeat quickened. They repeated the test several times along the same ancient channel. Each sample produced more fine placer gold. Amelia smiled, though excitement never replaced scientific discipline. "This isn't enough to make anyone rich," she said calmly, "but it's powerful evidence that a much larger deposit may exist upstream." Back at the farmhouse that evening, Noah opened Samuel's final journal with trembling hands. The last pages contained no maps, only careful reflections written shortly before his grandfather's death. Near the bottom appeared one final message. "If one day you find this place, don't take only what the river leaves behind. Protect the river that gave it to you." Noah closed the journal and looked through the window toward the quiet swamp glowing beneath the setting sun. At that moment, he understood the true inheritance Samuel had left him was not the possibility of gold. It was the responsibility to protect the land that had guarded its secret for generations. Noah quietly decided he would finish the work his grandfather had begun, no matter how long it took. Months passed as Noah Walker and Dr. Amelia Brooks expanded their field surveys across the swamp. Every sediment sample, geological core, and laboratory analysis strengthened the same conclusion. Independent experts from several universities confirmed that the forgotten floodplain contained one of the largest natural placer gold deposits ever documented in the eastern United States. Unlike deep underground mines, the gold had accumulated gradually over thousands of years as ancient branches of the Ohio River slowed and deposited heavy minerals before changing course. News spread with astonishing speed. Television crews arrived almost daily. Geologists, environmental scientists, historians, and government survey teams crossed the muddy trails that only months earlier everyone had avoided. The swamp that had once inspired laughter now attracted national attention. Success also attracted people with very different priorities. One bright autumn morning, a line of polished black SUVs stopped beside the old farmhouse. Stepping out first was Victor Langley, one of America's wealthiest mining executives. At 63 years old, Victor stood over 6 feet 2 with broad shoulders, neatly combed silver hair, piercing steel blue eyes, and a sharply trimmed gray beard that reflected decades of corporate success. His expensive tailored suit contrasted with the muddy ground beneath his polished leather shoes. Calm, articulate, and remarkably persuasive, Victor believed natural resources existed to be developed for economic growth. Having built a global mining empire from abandoned properties, he rarely accepted rejection because money had solved nearly every problem throughout his career. After politely shaking Noah's hand, Victor unfolded detailed development plans across the farmhouse kitchen table. "I'll offer $100 million for the entire property," he said evenly. "My company will create jobs, invest in the community, and recover every ounce of gold beneath this swamp." For a long moment, Noah quietly studied the drawings showing dredging equipment, processing facilities, and new access roads cutting through the wetlands. Then he slowly closed the folder. "My grandfather spent 50 years protecting this place." Victor smiled confidently. "And now you can finally profit from it." Noah gently pushed the proposal back. "I don't believe he protected it so someone could destroy it." Victor left respectfully, but his offer became national headlines. As researchers continued documenting the wetlands, Noah made another unexpected discovery. Hidden beneath loose floorboards inside Samuel Walker's abandoned workshop rested dozens of sealed metal storage boxes. Inside were thousands of handwritten research records, ecological surveys, water quality measurements, wildlife observations, and correspondence exchanged between Samuel and state biologists over nearly 4 decades. Together, the documents painted a far larger picture than anyone had imagined. Samuel had already proven that large-scale excavation would permanently collapse the delicate wetland ecosystem. The swamp acted as a natural filtration system for streams feeding the Ohio River. Destroying its peat soils and ancient river sediments would release pollutants, eliminate wildlife habitat, and contaminate downstream water supplies affecting thousands of families. During several public hearings organized by the state of Kentucky, Noah refused to argue about money. Instead, he presented Samuel's research alongside modern scientific evidence collected by Amelia and independent environmental agencies. Maps, water models, ecological studies, and geological reports all reached the same conclusion. The gold could enrich a few people. The wetlands protected millions. After weeks of testimony, the governor signed legislation permanently designating the entire area as the Kentucky National Geological and Wetland Preserve. Industrial mining, large-scale excavation, and commercial dredging were permanently prohibited. Standing beside the quiet marsh at sunset, Noah watched birds circle above the ancient waters. For the first time, he felt certain that protecting his grandfather's legacy had become far more valuable than any fortune hidden beneath the mud. 1 year after the wetlands received permanent protection, the quiet marsh outside Paducah had transformed into a place of discovery rather than controversy. Wooden boardwalks stretched gently above the water without disturbing the fragile ecosystem. Observation towers overlooked nesting birds, restored river channels, and thriving cypress groves, while students from across the country arrived carrying notebooks instead of mining equipment. What had once been dismissed as a worthless swamp had become a living classroom where nature itself served as the teacher. Noah Walker never considered himself a public speaker, yet he found himself welcoming visitors almost every morning. Though still only in his 20s, the hardships he had endured gave him a calm maturity beyond his years. His quiet voice and humble manner earned trust more easily than dramatic speeches ever could. Whenever reporters praised him for discovering the wetlands, Noah always corrected them gently. "I didn't discover anything," he would say. "My grandfather simply taught me where to keep looking." Working alongside the state of Kentucky, Dr. Amelia Brooks, several universities, and conservation agencies, Noah helped establish the Walker Wetlands Research Center, dedicated to wetland ecology, geology, watershed restoration, and environmental education. Instead of allowing the preserved gold deposit to become a symbol of lost wealth, the center transformed it into a reminder that protecting natural resources often created far greater value than exploiting them. Revenue from guided educational tours, research partnerships, grants, and ecotourism was placed into a nonprofit foundation supporting future scientists dedicated to conservation. During the center's first scholarship ceremony, Noah met Emma Collins. 19 years old, Emma possessed a slender build, long auburn hair usually tied into a simple braid, bright blue eyes filled with quiet determination, and lightly sunburned skin earned from years spent outdoors beside rivers. She had grown up in a small fishing family along the lower Ohio River, where generations of her relatives depended entirely upon healthy waterways for their livelihood. Industrial pollution upstream had gradually destroyed local fish populations, forcing many families, including Emma's, to abandon the profession they had loved for decades. Rather than becoming bitter, Emma dedicated herself to studying environmental science, believing rivers could recover if people finally chose restoration over exploitation. When Noah handed her the Foundation's very first scholarship certificate, he noticed the same quiet determination he had once seen in Samuel Walker's journals. "What do you hope to do?" he asked. Emma smiled modestly. "I want future children to inherit rivers that are healthier than the ones we received." Her answer reminded Noah exactly why the center existed. Years passed, and Emma exceeded every expectation. After graduating with honors in environmental science, she led restoration projects across wetlands, floodplains, and river systems throughout the United States. Many damaged ecosystems once considered impossible to recover slowly returned to life under her guidance. During interviews, journalists often asked where her inspiration began. She always answered the same way: in a swamp everyone else believed was worthless. Meanwhile, the Walker Wetlands Research Center grew into one of America's leading institutions for wetland conservation. Scientists, engineers, students, and policymakers visited from around the world, not searching for hidden gold beneath the mud, but seeking the wisdom hidden within Samuel Walker's forgotten journals and Noah's decision to protect them. Standing on the observation deck one quiet evening, Noah watched thousands of birds rise above the restored marshlands. He realized the greatest treasure beneath the swamp had never been the gold waiting underground. It was the future that could grow above it. 20 years slipped quietly by, and the forgotten swamp outside Paducah, Kentucky no longer resembled the muddy wilderness people had once mocked. Every year, hundreds of thousands of visitors crossed the wooden boardwalks of the Walker Wetlands Research Center. School children learned about rivers that shaped civilizations. University students studied geology and ecology where ancient river channels still rested beneath the wetlands. Scientists from around the world came not searching for gold, but hoping to understand how one young man's decision had preserved an entire ecosystem for future generations. Birds nested among towering bald cypress trees, turtles basked on floating logs, and clear streams wound peacefully through wetlands that had once been considered worthless. At 44 years old, Noah Walker had grown into a man whose quiet confidence reflected years spent serving something greater than himself. His once dark hair now carried strands of silver near his temples, while his neatly trimmed beard showed the first signs of age. The strong hands that had once shoveled mud searching for answers had become weathered from planting trees, restoring habitats, and guiding countless volunteers across the preserve. Though recognition had followed him for decades, Noah remained the same humble young man who believed nature deserved gratitude rather than ownership. He never left his grandfather's farmhouse. The small wooden home remained simple, surrounded by wildflowers, native grasses, and towering trees that Samuel Walker himself had planted long before anyone imagined the wetlands would become famous. Visitors often asked why Noah never built a larger home after grants and donations transformed the research center into one of America's leading conservation institutions. He always smiled. "This house reminds me why I started." Inside his modest study, 3 objects immediately captured every visitor's attention. Framed carefully upon the wall hung the faded county receipt showing the exact $15 Noah had paid for the abandoned swamp. Beside it rested Samuel Walker's weathered journal, its leather cover worn smooth after decades of careful study. Leaning quietly in the corner stood the old steel shovel Noah had carried during those first lonely weeks digging through cold mud, long before anyone believed his story. Almost every tour ended with the same question. "Mr. Walker," someone would eventually ask, "do you ever regret refusing $100 million?" Noah never answered immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window overlooking the endless wetlands where birds circled peacefully above the restored waterways. Finally, he smiled. "I never bought a swamp." The visitors often laughed softly, believing he was joking. Then Noah gently rested one hand upon Samuel's journal. "I believe God simply guided me to finish the promise my grandfather quietly protected his entire life." Silence always followed. Looking across the marsh where sunlight shimmered upon the calm water, Noah continued softly. The gold beneath the mud was never the greatest treasure. The greatest treasure was the wisdom to leave something better behind for people we would never meet. That autumn evening, Noah walked alone along the same narrow trail where he had first stepped into the swamp 20 years earlier. Warm sunlight reflected across the peaceful wetlands as thousands of birds lifted into the sky together. In that quiet moment, he realized Samuel's greatest inheritance had never been hidden beneath the earth. It lived within every student protecting a river, every scientist restoring a wetland, every child learning that creation is something to care for rather than consume. And Noah finally understood that God's greatest treasures are rarely measured by what we uncover beneath the ground. They are measured by what we choose to protect after we find them. Sometimes God's greatest miracles are not buried beneath gold or hidden inside forgotten places. Sometimes they are found in the courage to protect what others overlook and the faith to do what is right when no one else believes. In our own lives, we may never discover a hidden treasure, but every act of kindness, integrity, and patience can become a blessing for future generations. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of faith and hope. May God bless you, your family, and everyone you love. Amen.